I remember in training, you used to tell a story when you doubled a patient and at a certain point the patient said to doctor, "You don't understand me." And then he said to you as a double, "You explain me to him." The patient felt you as a double, understood him better than doctor did. In classical psychodrama, in the early days, Moreno used a double quite often, quite routinely, and I know that your style has changed and you have begun to feel that the quintessence of directing is to extract that information and those feelings from the protagonist. When did that happen, that you began to change the use of the double? How did that happen?
You'll have to realize that Moreno's most profound work was with psychotic patients whose rationale is very bizarre and hard to understand. So just as that young patient said, "You explain me to him," he realized that the doubles began to translate this bizarreness to him. The doubles helped him to understand and grasp better what these patients were experiencing and what they were about. Well, as we move more and more towards the norm, especially with students, I realize that these people need to learn to speak for themselves. So what I do now very often is turn it around. We were instructed as auxiliary doubles to extract the essence of the internal from the protagonists, to speak those emotions and confront those ideas which they were unable to give voice to. I do the opposite. I say to the double, "You are your interior dimension." That double will represent your exterior. Don't deal with the exterior. You've now got someone who will take care of that. You deal with your inward self. That is the turnabout that I discovered, and it came in the course of a psychodrama when a mature student was doing a very profound session and suddenly jumped up and said, "I need to be my own double at this point.
I need to explain myself to me."
Right, and to you, and I know best now what I am feeling.
Has your directing changed in any way over the years?
Yes, it certainly has.
I know you take shortcuts. That's one thing I noticed. I don't scene set as much as you used to.
No, I scene set where I consider it necessary as a warm-up. Yes, where it is not essential or might distract from protagonist warm-up, I don't use scene setting, as is the case of a patient who was transported into a psychological world where time and space fell away altogether, everything merged. She wove a pattern, but she didn't weave a room or a space. The other thing is I have learned to trust the process to a point where I can relax. I have very little preconceived ideas where the session must go, unless I have a clear notion what the protagonist is struggling with. Then I might say to myself, well, I need to reach this or that area that the protagonist has not been in touching on. With a new protagonist especially, I become very naive, very receptive, let it happen, and I extract my inspiration from the source. That has become my style. I don't need to prove myself or prove that the method works. It takes care of itself somehow. In the beginning, many directors think that they have to be clever and they have to prove themselves. They have to perform. It's not a performance. It's a dance. It's a dance with other people, and it has to be a harmonious dance. Not in the sense that I am the director, I'm going to do this.
I suppose when you think about the tango, you have two people to do that tango. It takes two to tango, clearly. Whereas if you had a more modern dance, people dance quite individually, and both are looked at. Whereas in the tango, or a dance like that, where you need each other, each part to complete the whole, and what you are saying is that you are following each other all the time, so that they aren't individual performance. There is the relationship, the encounter, the psyche, and the Godhead that is created between two people.
Right.
Could you explain the original concept of surplus reality, Zerka?
Well, Moreno saw that his patients moved into areas which were not real to him or to you or to me, but were real to them. And often they went beyond fantasy in a way, beyond intuition, almost like a trance-like experience, and he began to think, well, Marx conceived of surplus value. What the worker produces and the capitalist gains from that labor is the surplus, and really shouldn't go to the capitalist. It should go back to the workers. And Moreno said that surplus reality is out there somewhere, and I must make it concrete and specific and return it to the center of the protagonist where it has meaning and purpose. I can't meet the psyche unless I live in this surplus reality along with the patient.
So it wasn't necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, it was
a developmental step.
And it was surplus to the reality that was being created at the moment. And it helped Moreno understand the other thoughts and ideas that were going on which weren't expressed in this moment.
It casts reality into a different light, a purely subjective one, which only the protagonist knows. Here's an example. A patient comes from New York City in the train to Beacon. We know that this train tends to be a rather grubby one, nothing glamorous about it. When she reenacts the trip, she describes it as being royal blue in color, and it is taking her to heaven. Her road to heaven was actually a road more akin to hell, because she was entering a profoundly psychotic state and had to be placed in a mental hospital. You and I may think that this is just a fantasy, but for her it is a reality. We know it to be a fantasy. For the patient, it is more a fantasy, it is her reality.
So it's added reality.
Yes, it's more than a fantasy, it's her reality. Added for us, yes, but we must deal with it as her reality. It creates a new framework of operation altogether.
What I find interesting, Zerka, is that in some psychodrama sessions, surplus reality enters the drama. In others, it's totally not there. So, working inside somebody's body, doing the scenes, for example, from inside the stomach, inside the head, would you say that that would be working in surplus reality, or is that another reality? You understand? Some therapists, for example, if they have a protagonist with a brain tumor, might say, right, let's go inside that head. Let's go inside the tumor. Let's see what that scene feels like to you.
I think any role reversal, whatever its source, is a form of surplus reality. It's going beyond personal reality of who you were before, seeking the reality of some other being or some other thing, and that is itself surplus. These are surplus reality techniques.
What does this feel like you to be 77 and still working harder than you worked maybe 15 years ago?
Well, I don't think I worked hard. What happened when I sold Beacon seemed like semi-retirement because I was only able by contract with the Horsham people to use the theatre 2 weeks a year. When Horsham was sold to a real estate developer and the theatre was threatened with destruction, I suggested to Claire Danielson that she might take over the theatre. She did, and it had it reconstructed in Highland, New York, across the river from Beacon. I also wanted Moreno to go on living in the theatre. By rescuing the theatre, I rescued my career and made it possible to work almost any time I wanted to in that wonderful theatre. I wasn't thinking about me, I was thinking, this theatre mustn't die. It was impossible for me to let it die. So again, it was a resuscitation out of an idea of a gift to something or someone other than myself, the focus of which in turn gave a gift to me. Do you see? It gave me my working career back as a gift.
Absolutely.
And so, yes, from that moment on, I began to work again more intensely. And what has happened is I do very little mailing or advertising. It happens mostly by word of mouth. If you work at something 54 years, it will be 55 years now soon, something happens to your name. It becomes a legend in itself. So people come to me and say to me, "You are a living legend." They told Moreno that, by the way, in his lifetime. That's what happens, and they want to see and experience this living legend before it's too late. So the pressure is not only on me, it's also on the others.
So, at 77, how often are you running groups? Every month?
Monthly, and sometimes more often. For instance, I will be working in August in Cambridge, and I will be working in Denver and Massachusetts. September, I'll be working several weeks on my own, maybe a weekend and a group coming from abroad. In October, I have 2 groups coming from abroad in my own training groups.
Well, Elaine Goldman and I used to talk about the possibility of having a retirement home for psychiatrists. I beg your pardon, Zerka, for psychodramatists. What do you think that would look like if you could do a future projection of all of us psychodramatists who work 15 of our years, or 30 years, or 60 years? What might that retirement home be like?
Oh, it would be a hell of a lot of fun. We would all have our reminiscences in action.
Yes, right, great. But who would you be able to get up to get the tea?
Well, we would share our lives with each other. It could be wonderful. Where can we find such a center?
Thank you. Thank you for talking this morning, Zerka. And then I keep thinking loud. Should Howell become a retirement home for old psychodramatists? Would we ever sleep or stop laughing or crying or telling stories in action? If it is true that old psychodramatists don't die, they just fade away, we could even have an entire cemetery for psychodramatists. Future psychodrama trainees could come to the cemetery and say, "Oh, look, there's Adam and Ali Blattner. There is Dave Buchanan. There is Sandra Garfield. And the Sirocas. There is Zerka Moreno. And look, there is even an empty space for me." End of the reading, right?
Yes.
So, how are you feeling?
Okay, nice to revisit that interview. Yeah, and how much life she had at 77. Fantastic.
How was Marcia here in this
You did fine. You did wonderful. Yeah, you did wonderful.
And how did you feel Zerka's role?
Well,
you have the role, right?
I think so. I think about how much energy she had, and I think how amazing that she lived to be 99, and that was 22 years after that she was still so active, and certainly when she was no longer active in her body, she was continually active in her mind. So we as her students, as her friends, as her helpers, we were privileged to have her for so many years.
And after all this time, distant from the interview, do you have any significant change in the ideas that have been discussed?
Well, I remember how excited she was when she said, "Look, there's a man who discovered that Buber was influenced by Moreno, and there was evidence, you know, she had, and I also remember that she was very excited about her grandchildren, Jared and Gillian, and very much excited by Jonathan's work and so on. So to watch those developments in her own life were very exciting. And I said once when Jonathan was behind Obama's shoulder, when Obama signed the first stem cell research. That was the first thing he signed when he came in, and Jonathan was standing. I said, "You must be very proud." And she said, "No, he did it himself. I'm just pleased that he put up with two parents who were so busy working, but he did it himself." And I thought how important that thought is, that pride means that you take pride that you have your footprints on it. And she divorced herself from those footprints. I'm sure she knew the influence that they had, but he worked and works very hard in his own right to become what he has
Is it
become.
something that is fine? It's okay. Now, was it the last time Zerka came to the center? This in 1994?
No, she came. In '94. No, I think she came up until the end of Howell, '98. Continued to come.
And why was that the center closed?
Well, I think we'd done enough. We'd worked very hard. We were hoteliers as well as trainers. And there were centers growing all over Britain and Finland and lots of other places, and the numbers began to dwindle. So we put a combination of a new place where we didn't have to do accommodation for the students. So we had students and they stayed in bed and breakfast. So that lasted 2 years, and then it finished.
And how was the participation of Ken Sprague in that center? What was he doing? Because what I know is that, well, he was first of all a very active artist, and also when I saw first his name, it was with drawings on a handbook of psychodrama, if I'm not wrong, beautiful drawings at the beginning of each chapter.
Yes, we did 3 books together, where I co-edited, and he drew those drawings for each chapter. Yes, and he said he wasn't an illustrator, that he really felt that the drawings were chapters in their own right. Psychodrama Inspiration and Technique was the first one, co-edited with Paul Holmes. Psychodrama since Moreno, co-edited with Paul Holmes, and then the Handbook of Psychodrama, which was co-edited with Paul and Kate Tovan.
But was he also a trainer at the center?
He became that in sociodrama.
In sociodrama.
Sociodrama. He was a trainer more in sociodrama. For some people, he was able to also help them in psychodrama, but he was not a therapist, Ken. He was an artist. So his work was much more educational and
experimental
in the sociodrama field. And then he went to Australia and took his sociodrama degree there. And got himself certified in sociodrama there, so he was able to bring that into our center. But when I was training with the Morenos, if you did psychodrama, you learned to do sociodrama also, because it would be part of the session that you might have it be a social issue that comes into the psychodrama, or a psychodramatic issue that comes into the sociodrama. Here in Britain now we have quite a division. Monica Zerka, for example, has psychosociodrama, and that's done in different places. But the schooling has divided here between those people who are training in psychodrama and those who are in sociodrama and so on.
Now that you mentioned that here, from what I can hear from people when I talk with people, and I mention Marcia Karp, Marcia Karp is seen as a sort of the great mother of psychodrama in England. How was that, this big mother of psychodrama?
Well, it was very big responsibility to come from training in Beacon. There was no sociodrama. or psychodrama in Britain, except for Ari Badanes, who was doing a few workshops. He's since gone to Australia. So it was a huge responsibility to take that work into a country where there wasn't much work, but in that way. But Moreno had been here in 1955 to the Maudsley and given a demonstration, which to all reports was not that good. It was one of those ones where they thought, some people thought he was a little bit crazy, some people accepted it. But
when was it again, please?
1955,
yeah.
But then he was asked back to the therapeutic community. Dr. Jones, who started the therapeutic community concept, and Moreno was brought back. And Zerka told me that she went up to this doctor and said, "Do you remember me?" And he said to her in a Scottish accent, "Good God, who could forget you?" So to bring it here was a big responsibility. I hope I did my best. There are some very good psychodramatists who learned from us and who carried on the work in their own right, setting up their own institutes, training their own students. So we were able to do that here and in other places.
You were talking about the fact that Moreno sometimes took very controversial approaches and stimulated people to be controversial also. Do you have any tendency of being controversial also, or not? Or you are more harmonious with people? How do you...
Depends on the time and the place. It depends on the time and the place. I think I used to be more controversial than I am. On the other hand, I think living in Britain has changed that controversialness, because here people are much nicer and pleasanter and good and kind and polite and all those things. I've never been that, but I've tried to fit in as best I could, but people have thought I was rude and brash and didn't say please and thank you and things like that. Well, I wasn't raised to do that, but that's the culture here to do that. So, but yes, controversial in the sense that I remember Barbara Castle, who was a woman MP here in this country, and she said that when women are in a discussion with men, as she was in Parliament, that women should have as much right to speak up, because in the days that she was a parliamentarian, it was the men who had something to say. And I think Zerka taught us all that as a woman, how important it was to share her point of view. She didn't care if she was if she was judged or she would just say her piece, and she was brief. I like that about her.
Your last time with Zerka, do you remember? When was it?
It was 2012, 4 years before she died. I stayed with her about a week near the hospital. Sorry, no, she was still at home. She was still before she went to Maryland.
So you've been to Charlottesville?
Yes, many times. She was in bed, bedridden at that time, stopped being in the wheelchair. We had many discussions, several hours a day, and then I would go back to the hotel and so on. She gave me one of her suitcases because she said, "I'll never use that again." She knew that she was not going to be a traveler again. She gave me back a blouse I'd given her 40 years earlier, because it was her birthday when she came to Holwell, and I didn't have money to get her a present, so I gave her my best French silk blouse with long
She was working almost up to the end of her life. I remember us doing things even when she was not able to get in her wheelchair.
She was still seeing groups.
She was still doing, and we were still working, not only doing psychodrama, but also documenting.
Yes, I remember you have some interviews with her in the chair, doesn't you?
Exactly. And so she went up to the end, almost working in a reduced mode, but working. How do you feel yourself about ending psychodrama mission? Are you planning to go up to the end doing psychodrama?
Well, I never had the word retirement in my vocabulary. It was just not there. So I hope to be doing psychodrama until I draw my last breath, but let's see. It's an unknown quantity. I don't know.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to comment or to add or to express as a feeling, as we are also documenting your life? It's not only about the interview, it's not only about Zerka, it's about you and all the work that you have done, because you have been responsible for thousands of people.
I feel very lucky to have had the accident of seeing a book above my head, and I suppose above my head is an interesting analogy, because the ideas of both Morenos made me reach up a part of myself, reach up beyond myself, and learn and keep learning, and I'm still learning. So I guess it's not what happens to us in life, it's the lessons we're gaining from them each time and learning from them. And I think I'm still learning. And I think that's what's so interesting about Moreno's work, is that so many people all over the world are still learning from both Zerka and Doctor, and will be in many years to come. Still discovering so many people, Ed Schreiber looking at society, and you doing your, delving into the Countway Library and looking at the work and putting Zerka on film in many of her thought-provoking ideas as she was leaving us on one level, but she is continually with us. We had recently a birthday party for her, June 13th in Sweden, in which Peter Kellerman and Monica Vesburg, Judith Tesseri, Eva Folstrom, many people who had been in training with her, we were able to give her messages to the empty chair. And I think that goes on and will go on for many, many years. It would have been her 100th birthday this last June. So, but she had said that she'd had enough, and I think physically she knew she'd had enough, and I hope she knows that she'll continue to live on and on.
Is there presently in the psychodramatic community anyone who is more experienced than you are?
In the psychodramatic community, yes, all over the world, many people.
So we are still a junior.
I'm still a junior. I'm still a junior.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you.